Okay, I have confirmation that we're live. So good evening and welcome to this online Surbiton Neighbourhood Committee meeting. My name is Martin Newton from Democratic Services. I will firstly introduce the councillors and officers at the meeting. And for the benefit of those watching the live stream, can I ask everyone to acknowledge with good evening. So Councillor Abraham.
Good evening, everyone.
Councillor Bainan.
Good evening.
Councillor Folder Hughes.
Good evening.
Councillor Gander.
Good evening.
Councillor Green.
Good evening.
Councillor Holt.
Good evening.
Councillor Sharper.
Good evening.
Councillor Self.
Good evening, everybody.
Councillor Fouchercroft-Sumner.
Good evening.
Councillor Sweeney.
I'm here. Good evening.
Councillor White.
Good evening.
And Councillor Yoganathan.
Good evening to you, Martin.
We also have Alex Rosser-Trockus from Planning.
Good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
And there are other officers and IT providing support in the background. So as this is the first meeting of the new municipal year, the first item of business will be the election of the chair and vice chair or co-chairs of the committee for 2021. So can I call upon councillors present to make nominations for those positions, please?
Martin, I'm going to propose Alison Holt and Anita Schaefer as our co-chair for 2021.
Thank you, councillor. And is that seconded?
Yes, I'll second Anita, Councillor Sharper and Councillor Holt. Thank you.
Done, Susila.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if there are any members of the committee who wish to dissent from those proposals? Could you indicate now in the chat box? Otherwise, we will go to a recorded vote. Okay, there's no indication in chat, so that is agreed.
Good.
And Councillor Holtz is the co-chair with Councillor Sharper for this municipal year. I understand that Councillor Holt will chair this particular meeting, and I now invite her to take the chair.
Thank you very much, Martin, and thank you, everyone. This is the first virtual meeting of Surbiton Neighbourhood since the last public meeting, which was on the 12th of March, before lockdown. I just would like us to remember those who have lost loved ones and their lives have been changed as a result of COVID-19. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to give thanks to those in our community who have helped in different ways during the pandemic, from the waste collectors, the carers in our community, and also the care workers. Food bank donations and street champs that have been springing up all over the place. Just to mention a few, there's loads more, but I just wanted to mention a few people. So we're very blessed to have a lot of people in our area in Surbiton. It's great that we have such a caring and community-minded people in our midst. We are still in lockdown, although we are beginning to gradually be released, but it is to bear in mind that we need to be alert and we need to remember those who are still isolating. I have some formal bits to go through, and to say members and officers are asked to please ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or in silent mode for the duration of the meeting. The meeting is being broadcast on the live YouTube channel. A copy of the recording will be available on the channel shortly after the meeting. Members and officers are reminded to keep their microphones on mute unless they are called to speak. Members can indicate if they wish to speak via the meeting chat function. Please do not use the chat function to ask questions of officers or councillors because they will not be answered. But if you could make it known through the chat that you want to speak, that would be really helpful, and I'll try and make sure that I see it and ask to speak in order. Members of the public are reminded that the planning application process is constrained by the need to have regard to current planning policy at national, regional and local levels, as well as all other material planning considerations, including case law precedent. The decision-making process is often described as quasi-judicial because local planning authorities have to act reasonably within the bounds of planning law and above considerations, and are not free to determine planning applications simply because of the weight of public opinion. As well as the members of the committee, we also have a number of officers present whose cameras are switched off and are here to advise the committee on issues before it. There is a pre-meeting registration scheme for residents and applicants wishing to participate on the planning applications that are considered by this committee. Members of the public who have registered to speak will be contacted at the appropriate time to notify them to join the meeting. If we are unable to get in contact with a member of the public and they are unable to join the meeting, we will read out on their behalf a written statement which they have supplied to us in advance. Turning to tonight's agenda, item 1 we have gone through. Welcome to the committee. Welcome you to the committee. I will confirm that the arrangements for dealing with tonight's planning applications. I'll go through that when we reach that item. The next item on for absence. Martin, do we have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair. All committee members are present. Thank
you. On item 3, we've moved to item 3, which is declaration of interest. Does any of the members want to indicate that they have on the chat? Obviously, Shushila has said. Would you like to say, Shushila?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a declaration of interest in relation to the planning application 127 Chiltern Drive and the Chiltern Works. I'm the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors. We've had discussions. I've had discussions with residents many occasions previously, and have also sat in meetings with the developers before. So I wish to declare that interest. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And that's an item of consultation. So would you be wanting to take part in?
It says planning application here. So yeah, consultation item. Fine. I just thought it's better to declare. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to also say, in a similar vein to Councillor Abraham, I have 2 attended meetings as well. I just wanted to declare that interest as well for Chiltern Drive Works. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right.
The same, ditto for me in terms of conversations. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, John. And Malcolm, have you?
Thank you, Chair. In relation to the consultation on the planning application for 127 Chiltern Drive and the land to the rear, known as Chiltern Works, this will be going to the Development Control Committee later this summer or in the early autumn to determine the application. I chair the committee, so I will not be taking part in any part of the consultation this evening. If this was a meeting in a physical room, what I would normally do is sit at the back and listen. So I will switch my video off, mute my sound, and take my video off, and I'll listen in, but I will not be taking part in the item. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, we will be going through that at that point, but that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Self. Councillor Sumner.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I too have attended residents' meetings regarding Chiltern Works. However, due to the Localism Act and most recently last month's judgment, Holborn versus Hackney Borough Council, I don't think this is in any way a declarable interest, and will be fully taking part in the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Thank you. I will go through the at the point when we get to that point, because it is a consultation, and the members of the Development Control Committee have obviously have obviously got some considerations to make. So thank you all for that. If we go on to the next. So the next item, which is item 4, we've done. Item 5 is the minutes of the meeting on the 12th of March. Can I take those as agreed? Yeah, unanimously. Okay. Thank you very much. So the next item is item 6 on the agenda for planning applications. It's the first item is on for the development of land at 27 to 29 St James's Road, and it's to determine the application for the erection of a 5-bedroom dwelling. The recommendation on this application is to permit the application subject to the conditions and informative set out in the report. I will formally move that the motion from the chair at this point so that it can be voted on at the conclusion of the committee discussions. Is that motion seconded by anyone?
Yes, Madam Chair, I can second that.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Schapper. Alex, would you like to present this item, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just bear with me. I am having some technical issues in the Guildhall, but I will do my best. If you bear with me, I should be able to share my screen shortly. Could members confirm that they are able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So the first item on the agenda we have this evening is an application for development land of 27 to 29 St James's Road, Surbiton, and the application involves the proposal of an erection of a 5-bedroom dwelling. If I can begin the presentation by showing the site location plan, and the site is outlined in red on your screens. And then I will just move through to some contextual photographs. So as you can see here, the application site is currently unmade land, previously developed, and currently surrounded by hoarding, which you can see in the next photograph. This is a photograph from St Philip's Road looking northwest. And here are some photographs of the interior of the site. As you can see, it is in a state of disrepair, and some building works have happened adjacent, resulting in some materials left on site. Here is a site constraints plan where you can see the site falls within the St Andrews Square Conservation Area and just outside the boundary of the Surbiton District Centre, which is hatched, hopefully where you can see my cursor. And here is a summary of the proposals. So the erection of a 4-storey, including basement dwelling containing 5 bedrooms. It would be a car-free development subject to 106, which would preclude future occupiers from obtaining on-street car parking permits. 2 cycle parking spaces would be provided on site, compliant with London Plan standards, and a generous quantum of private outdoor amenity space in the form of a garden would be included. If I just move on to the proposed street scene, you can see where my cursor is. This would be the new dwelling constructed in the gap on St Philip's Road and to the rear of St James's. And I can move on to a closer image of the front elevation showing the maximum height of the structure, which would be in keeping with the eaves of the adjacent property on St Philip's Road and St James's. Here we have a view which shows the basement, the below ground works, and some side elevations for you to see. This shows the rear elevation and the ground level changes, showing the access route from the rear up into the garden. And here is a proposed block plan showing the new structure in place and the comparative separation distances between the existing properties, both on St Philip's Road, St James's, and to the rear. And if I just quickly go through the floor plan, so this shows the lower ground or basement area with living accommodation and kitchen. the upper ground floor or ground, and you can see here in green the garden space and the bin stores to the front of the property, obscured by the new boundary. First floor, where you begin to see the bedroom accommodation, the second floor, and the roof plan. If I just skip back to show the front elevation, I'll just give a brief summary of the materials. So the materials would comprise yellow stock brick with red stock banding, and these would match the adjacent properties. Timber windows would be used commensurate with the conservation area status of the site, and the roof forms would be in keeping with those adjacent on St Philip's Road and those to the front on St James's. So if I just move back to the recommendation, that is to approve subject to the signing of the legal agreement and the conditions set out in the officer's report. Thank you, Chair. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Alex. We have got one registered objector for this application. We've got Darren Headley. I'm just looking to see if he's arrived.
Yes, can you hear me, Madam Chair?
I can. I see you on my screen. Okay. So yes, thank you for coming this evening. You have 5 minutes as a part of the process. You have 5 minutes in which to make your representations. But thank you for coming along this evening and welcome. We will let you know when you get to 1 minute to go, so you're aware. But
okay,
if you go, you can start now.
Start now. Okay. Now, on behalf of the owners of 2729 St James Road, and as an experienced, fully qualified architect, I object to this application for a 5-bedroom house to be built on this part of the original rear gardens. Background history is that there have been several previous planning applications for 5-bedroom house which were proposed on much larger sized plots of land, but were refused due to the massing and lack of good quality garden amenity space. However, this current planning application is for a substantial house on a much smaller plot of land with an area of only 0.2 hectares. And does not offer much garden amenity for the proposed new 5-bedroom house. Garden amenity is very small and awkward in shape, dog legs around the back of the house to increase the total garden area. The garden is poorly sited to the north of the proposal. It will almost be entirely overshadowed by the house, so it is unlikely there'll be even much grass be able to grow very successfully in its location as indicated on the plans. Therefore, this is not a good quality or well laid out garden amenity for such a substantial family house. The negative impact on neighbours is because it is a much smaller plot than previous proposals have had for this 5-bedroom house. It was cramped on the site and it appears very large and bulky when viewed from 27 and 29 St James Road. The concern is that a new building of this scale will reduce the natural light levels to the ground and lower ground floor flats in both 27 and 29 St James Road, which have their main living rooms and bedrooms facing onto the development. The natural daylight levels in these flats are very sensitive to any external changes as they have smaller windows. There will be a reduction of natural daylight to those flats, which will have a negative effect on the occupiers. The garden areas to 27 and 29 St James Road are well used by the residents. I believe that the mass and scale of this proposed development will make the space feel more enclosed and have an overshadowing effect on the rear gardens to 27 and 29 St James Road, and therefore cause a lot of sunlight to those gardens to the detriment of the residents. No daylight or sunlight assessment has been carried out and submitted as part of this application. Non-compliance with lifetime home policies, which contravene the adopted Kingston Council core policy. I refer to the Kingston Council Residential Design Guide, SPD, which states that London Plan Policy 3.7 C and B and Core Strategy Policy DN13 require that all new homes are designed and built to lifetime home standards. The Council's Supplementary Planning Advice Note, Lifetime Home to Wheelchair Housing, provides additional guidance on how lifetime home standards should be applied throughout the borough. However, this application is not lifetime homes compliant and therefore does not meet the criteria of this policy for the following reasons. For a fully lifetime home compliant dwelling, both the approach to the home and the entrance should have a level access with no steps, so it makes getting to the home as easy as possible for everyone. This helps with carrying luggage or parents carrying children, pushing buggies or bikes, and makes it easier if you're less agile or for older people with walking frames, and generally makes it safer when entering or leaving the dwelling. For a previous scheme, there was ramped access provided to the side of the building to allow access to the lower level. Therefore, that met the lifetime home standards and made the building more accessible. However, for this proposal, there is no alternative access. The only way to approach it, the dwelling, is by stepped access, both leading up to the upper ground floor and down to the lower ground floor. The proposed dwelling must have a wheelchair accessible WC on the entrance level, with potential for a shower to be installed so that everybody, whether living there or visiting, can use the toilet. There is no entrance level accessible WC shown on the proposed plans to meet this standard. The doors on plans should be of sufficient width to meet the lifetime home standards, have an unobstructed 300mm nib from the leading edge of all doors at the entrance level, which the plans do not show, and therefore the layout does not comply with lifetime homes. The main stair is also not lifetime homes compliant because it is not suitable for the provision of a future stair lift, as it should have a minimum of 900mm clear unobstructed distance from the bottom flight of the stair to the wall opposite. However, in this case, the main entrance door obstructs the ability to provide a stair lift. The non-compliance with the building regulations. The staircase does not comply with building regulations because of the internal main stair leading up to the third floor protrude into the hallway adjacent to the main entrance. The front door is tight up against the stair, which is not a good design and not permitted. Furthermore, the positioning of the front door is also not Part M compliant either, as it is too close to the bottom flight of the staircase. Any changes to the position of the entrance door would affect the balance of the main elevation. In summary, we object to this application on the following grounds: the negative impact on the neighbours, the massing, scale and design, as the plot is too small to accommodate a 5-bedroom house, poorly designed garden amenity space, which will mostly be in total shade. It doesn't comply with lifetime home standard, and therefore contravenes the Council's core strategy policy DM13, as the housing quality in the mix. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Headley. That was a good presentation, so thank you very much for that. I'd like to welcome Mr. Campbell to the meeting here. Yeah, Mr. Campbell's there. I need to switch your microphone on.
Yes, hi there. Good evening, councillors.
Good evening. So you also have 5 minutes to present your comments to the committee, and we'll let you know when there's a minute to go.
Sure. I'll just go through a couple of points, but not at length. So I'll then be open to questions from any councillors. So I'll keep it brief.
So thank you very much for that. I'd like to welcome Mr. Campbell to.
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me again?
I can. I'm not quite sure what that interference was there. There is your period of 5 minutes to speak, and then there'll be some questions from the members of the committee after.
Yeah, sure.
I'll let you.
The scheme presented tonight is identical to the one approved previously. So it actually happens that Ms. Roster Trokas, who's the officer tonight here on the committee, was dealt with that previous application for the 4 bedrooms. So the issues arose at that application. This is identical to that. The internal layout differs, and the stairs are the same things, but the internal layout is a 5-bedroom house as opposed to 4 flats. The elevation set out of the site was determined by many meetings and consultations with conservation over a good year and a half, 2 pre-apps and 2 planning applications. And it's designed, we surveyed the adjoining property at number 2 St. Philip's Road, and it's basically a mirror image of that. But because the plot is smaller, it's actually shallower than the adjoining properties. And it's also stepped back as the elevation that the officer showed, that the rear of the building is actually a story less than the front. So the front was kept in keeping with the rest of St. Philip's Road, which is actually quite substantial frontage, as you know, in terms of height. But we were able to reduce the rear because we don't need the floor ceiling heights that the Victorians had. The rest of the houses on St. Philip's Road were, as you know, all originally houses anyway, substantial houses, and subsequently, I think all of them, bar maybe one, has been converted into 4 flats laterally, 1 flat per floor. Ours are considerably smaller, but the same width and the same frontage as one bay, because they're all detached villas. As I'm sure all councillors are aware of, it's quite a well-known street. And I think the councillors are probably well aware of this site, which has been in the state for quite some time. years, in fact, decades almost. I'm not only the architect and the agent of the site, and we've been trying to develop this since we bought it in about 2 years ago. For various legal reasons, we haven't been able to go ahead with the 4 flat scheme. We can legally build a house, and therefore we're going for a change, basically for the same scheme, but as a 5-bedroom house. And because of objections from the neighbour, this has obviously been held up because the committees were held up because of the coronavirus. So this is about 2.5 months since the officer's recommendation, and we're champing at the bit to get started on this site, and we've been wanting to build for a long time. And it's an eyesore. We've tried to keep it as well as possible. We've got we keep the hoardings well painted. I was down there recently and took a lot of signage off that people have put up on it to try and make it look a bit more respectable. But we really just want to get this thing done and dusted and crack on with it. And we're extremely frustrated that we haven't been able to start on it. But if we get planning with your help tonight, then we'll endeavour to start within the next 2 months. And I'm open to any questions, obviously, but that's the crux of the matter.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. I'm now going to ask members, firstly, if councillors have any questions from Mr. Headley. You can put it in the chat box. I've not got anyone putting, nobody wants to say anything? No? Okay. Thank you. The next was to ask if you've got any questions of Mr. Campbell. No questions? Yes.
I think from Councillor Sumner and then Councillor Self.
Okay. Oh, sorry. I was just looking in the chat box, but I was just looking for names in the chat box. So, but yes, so that's Councillor Felchcott-Summers. Would you like to go first?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Campbell. I live very locally around the corner, so I know that the site is being kept tidy. My questions, I'll be very brief because I know Malcolm wants to also ask some questions. As this building's now going to be over 11 metres, do you plan to, obviously there's about change in law that's gone through about fire safety regulations and things. So are you installing sprinklers? That's my first question, because it will be over 11 metres. My second question, the officer's report makes reference to a restricted covenant, and I was just wanting a little bit more information on the restricted covenant. And then finally, one of the things I couldn't glean very easily from the reports, will the existing boundary walls be in situ once constructed, or are they moving at all? Because there are 2 drawings within the report and they seem to vary as to where that boundary was going to be. Thank you.
Yes, by all means. There's a wall built on site at the moment next to the hoarding. That's the boundary now. The centre line of that, and that wall is staying. So that wall was built beside the car park there. The restrictive covenant restricts us from building anything but a single dwelling house on the site. The covenant is in the name of the adjoining owner at 27 and 29, which is Mr. Headley, who's the objector tonight. So he holds the covenant over the site, which restricts us to building. We have tried to get agreement to build 4 flats, but it came to nothing. So we're back to you guys tonight to get a house and build a house instead, because that's what we legally can do. So the hoarding is sitting beside that wall, but the wall as it's built on, there's a yellow stock brick wall built on the site, as you know, next to where the cars are parked, where Mr. Headley says is actually his garden for his neighbours, but actually there's about 6 cars parked there. It's rented out as private parking, which I understand is a vein on the conservation area. There's a lot of people complains about that, but notwithstanding that wall is the boundary as it stands. There was a bit of dispute over it, which is why the original application for the 4 flats and the one for the site's slightly smaller, because the boundary was moved by agreement in the High Court at the beginning of this year to the centre line of that wall. And so there was another part of that question, was there? Sorry. Or?
Yes, as it's going to be over 11 metres, any building now over 11 metres has to have sprinklers, but I couldn't see any reference to that within the planning documents.
No, there isn't. You're quite right. Basically, it'll be according to building control regulations. In any case, this is just a planning stage. We have to submit if you approve this tonight, then the next stage is to submit a building regs application, which will cover all those items. But generally speaking, nowadays we do put sprinklers and things into the residential developments. It gives people peace of mind, even if you don't have to. It used to be years ago you didn't, because people were concerned that it would go off accidentally and ruin their furniture. Times have changed and people do like them now. It gives them a certain amount of security, and some insurers and things do ask them. So yeah, it's something we would definitely be looking to do. And there was another councillor, or there's somebody else wish to ask some questions, please.
I'm on mute, sorry. Councillor Self, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. The objector spoke about the poorly designed garden amenity space in his opinion. I would tend to go along with that. This is a 5-bedroom family house. With a 5-bedroom family house, I would normally expect a family to want to enjoy, by today's standard, a large garden. This doesn't. This has what I would have thought, looking at the plans, more of a garden that would be suited to a house of multiple occupation. Maybe you'd like to make on that, because we're running out of time.
1 minute.
My other question would be, irrespective of what the objector said, although I took note of what he said, of course, is could you explain what the wheelchair access would be for this building, please? Thank you.
As part of the building regs application, we'll have to go through the wheelchair access to the site generally, but as part of the original consultation and the original approvals through the planning was that the scheme was to match as close as possible to the dwellings on St Philip's Road, all of which have stepped access down the side onto the lower ground floor, and a very grand stepped access portico to the front. So we've, as I said, we surveyed next door and copied it virtually identically, in fact, and it's a condition of the planning application. The window reveals, porticos and everything have to match the adjacent property on Phillips Road. So we'll have to look at that in terms of what building control require in terms of meeting that requirement and not varying the architecture too much without agreement of officers.
Can we just finish that? So time is up now. Sorry, they had the 5 minutes, so if we just finish it there. Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell.
Sure.
Alex, would you like to do summing up? That's the end of the public participation.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to draw the members' attention to the planning history for the site, firstly, which was available in the committee report, and that is the approval that has already been alluded to, which was for a total of 4 flats, and that was approved in 2018. Therefore, the principle of residential development on this site has already been established. I'd also like to just respond quickly to some of the concerns raised by the objector. In terms of the garden amenity space, whilst it is on more than one level, it is way in excess of the local standards, whereby we require 50 square metres for a family house. This is in excess of that and considered acceptable on that basis, and to be in character with other properties which do have multi-level outdoor amenity space in the immediate surrounding area. And the same would go for the points raised on accessibility. There would be level access at points, but to the rear of the property, it would involve multi-levels, as other properties do in the immediate surrounding area. And any concerns over landscaping would be resolved by existing conditions that we have set out in the officer's report, where we would ask for further details of soft landscaping as part of any future approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. That is the end of the sort of the question. So if you, Mr. Connell and Mr. Headley, would like to leave the meeting now, you can follow the rest of the proceedings on the YouTube channel. I just want to now turn to the councillors and ask if you've got any questions of Alex, and if you can do that into the chat function now. So I've got a few people. I've got so Councillor Green, would you like to start?
Thanks. Do you just want questions at this point, Chair, or questions and comments together?
It'd probably be easier if we took questions first for Alex, and then we can do comments later on, a little bit of debate. But I'll see how you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wonder if you could explain a little bit more about this lifetime standards. It seems a little bit of a rock and a hard place, because if you had it all on the level, there's no way it would fit in with the current landscape on St Philip's and St James's roads, which, as you say, has this staircase up and a staircase down. But I was interested in what the objector said in terms of you cannot build without lifetime standards. You can't get planning without it, and it's part of our planning policy and national planning guidance. So I wonder if you could just explain that a little bit more, please.
What I'd like to clarify is that lifetime homes standards no longer exist. They have been superseded by building regulations. As such, that would be dealt with separately outside the remit of planning. So we would expect a property to adhere to building regulations, but it doesn't apply anymore.
Thank you very much for clarifying.
Okay, are you, is that any more questions? I'll go on to...
Nope, that's me done.
Okay, to Councillor Falchkoff-Sumner, would you like to give your question to Alex? I know you've got comments as well, but if we can do questions just now, first of all. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to ask of the planning team a few questions. The NPPF states that when you're in tilted balance, we have a duty to maximise potential for all sites. Now, this is for one home in an area which, as we know, is characterised by converted houses. So are we meeting that policy? I suspect we're not. So that's my question on that one. I have a question regarding the distance, both to the boundary and to the walls on St James, and also to those windows. If we recall from our last Surbiton meeting, where we discovered that any planning policy we might put in regarding frosted windows cannot be enforced, I would like to ask what the actual policy is regarding distances from windows to windows of an adjoining policy, because I wonder if this meets that policy. My next question is regarding, with reference to the presentation that was sent earlier this evening and that you actually gave recently, the site constraints plan. Is that correct, the actual layout of it? Because I think you've got the arrows in the wrong place. And then the other question I have is regarding, you say that family homes, there are plenty of family homes and houses within the local area where they have a split amenity space, as in this one. Now, I'm trying to think of it, because you either have flats from a conversion where you may have the ground floor flat will have access to the rear garden, and the basement flat will have a terrace. But I'm trying to actually think of actual houses where there is split amenity space. And yeah, I'm not saying I know Surbiton chapter and verse, but I do know it reasonably well. And I'm trying to think of some. So if you could give me some examples, that would really help me here. And finally, it's on planning conditions. Now, obviously, we all know that St Philip's is in the centre of Surbiton and is a very busy area. And I noticed you've put in a planning condition regarding site access and types of buildings. However, can I draw councillors' attention to the Business and Planning Bill, which has just gone through Parliament, which basically says that developers now can ignore planning conditions regarding timed access to sites and can basically build 24 hours a day. So I'm wondering, is there any condition that can be put on to firm up that planning condition? Because my concern is that obviously it's a residential area, and I would be worried about any kind of rush to get that built and use of these new laws that Mr. Johnson has put in place. So there are my questions. Thank you.
Alex, did you get those questions? Answer them.
I have made notes. Councillor Falchkoff-Sumner, if I've overseen any, please do remind me. In terms of site optimisation, you are correct that is a policy. However, we would see that this is optimising the site, albeit for a family-sized dwelling. We have to balance that requirement with the clear borough need for family-sized dwellings, which constitute dwellings of 3 bedrooms or above. The proposal for a family dwelling in this location is a rarity in comparison to other proposals, and we consider it an appropriate site for a family home. In terms of distances to windows, we don't have any policies requiring minimum separation distances, but what we do have is guidance set out in our residential design SPD, and we consider that the distances adjacent on St Philip's and those to the rear would comply with that guidance.
Sorry, I appear to have lost Alex.
Yeah, and Martin, are you in contact with Alex?
Yes, I'll just try and get in contact with her.
Do we need to do an adjournment, or do you?
It might be useful just for a moment or two, Chairman, yes, until we can be sure when we can get Alex back. Okay,
so I think we can do a 5-minute adjournment just to deal with this and hopefully get Alex back. Is that okay with everybody if we do 5 minutes? I can't see how long it's going to be. If we do 5 minutes, so that's on the basis of that would be at 20 past, we would start again.
Yeah, present.
Councillor Foley-Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Falchikoff-Sumner.
Present.
Councillor Abraham. Councillor Abraham.
I thought I said earlier, so yes, I'm present. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Councillor Sharper.
Yes, present. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeney.
Present.
Councillor Green.
Yes, still here.
Councillor White.
Present.
Councillor Yoganathan.
Present.
Councillor Gander.
Present.
Councillor Holt.
Present.
Councillor Self.
Present.
Okay, we're all set to go, Chair.
Yeah.
All right. That's fine.
All good, Alison.
So Alex, can you continue with Councillor Falchikoff?
The last point. Yeah.
I think I just had one remaining question to answer from Councillor Falchikoff-Sumner, and that related to time constraints. Despite the recent announcement, applicants would have to apply to work longer hours than are currently covered by the condition she alluded to in the officer's report. It wouldn't be automatic that they could work earlier in the morning or later into the evening.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, there was a couple of questions that I think were being missed.
I know, I was
if that's okay.
Yeah, I was just about to say, I don't know whether you want to say them again, but the ones I've written, I'll paraphrase what I've written down, was to do with the examples of similar places in the area that had split amenity places was certainly one I had on my list, and the site constraint plan with the arrows. Is that the two things?
Yeah, it's other family home dwellings that have that split amenity, because it tends to be within the area more flats. But yeah, thank you.
Just to clarify on that point, it's worth remembering that a lot of these substantial properties on St Philip's and St James's Road would have been originally built as family dwellings, and the split nature or multi-level nature of the amenity space you find in that area that is characteristic would have originally served families. So whilst now it does serve flats or houses of multiple occupation, it certainly wouldn't be unusual.
And this site constraint plan, and then I also think there was a question on the frosting of the windows as well, because we had that in a house previously, so I think probably we just want clarification on that.
So in terms of the site constraints plan, I'm not entirely clear which arrows you're alluding to, but I was just trying to illustrate the fact that the site falls within the conservation area and just outside the boundary of Surbiton District Centre. There were no other constraints that I intended to draw the attention of the members to. In terms of the obscurity of the windows, obviously, because this is a house, any obscured windows could be changed without planning permission. However, we have removed permitted development rights in that regard, as far as my reading of the conditions set out in the officer's report state. So that wouldn't be possible without applying to remove that obscurity.
Thank you, Alex. So I've got next Councillor Beenan.
Thank you, Chair. So it's about the lighting. I think the objector mentioned from the first comments was the effect on the garden and the lights, yeah, kind of blocking of the light into a certain number of the rooms on the property on St Philip's Road as well. You mentioned the assessment hadn't been carried out. Just looking for your view on that, how you kind of decided that it was okay, there wasn't an issue in terms of lighting. And also, presumably, I mean, I know this has been vacant for a long time, but presumably at one point there was a house on this space. Just trying to work out, what the kind of the history going back, what was there before, and that would have obviously had an impact on surrounding properties at the
I'm not aware of any built structure on that site for some time. So in recent history, at least, there hasn't been a dwelling on that site. Correct me if anyone's got any information that goes back further, but I don't think there has been. And in terms of the separation distances between the new structure and the properties on St James's Road 27 to 29, we believe that it would be compliant with BRE standards given that separation distance.
Okay, thank you. And in terms of the property next to, there's a property back on St Phillips as well, back to the lights into the rooms on St Phillips Road?
In this case, we don't believe any principal habitable rooms would be unacceptably affected, and that the window on the flank elevation of the existing property, number 2 St Phillips Road, doesn't relate to a habitable room window.
Okay, thank you.
Is that questions, Councillor Beenan?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
And the next person I thought is Councillor Self.
Was that me, Chair? There's a lot of feedback going on. Thank you, Chair. This is a question relating to if somebody got their microphone on. I don't know what it is. There's a lot of feedback. That's better. This is a question relating to the amenity space, the outdoor amenity space, the garden. I've got in front of me on my other computer here the plan, showing the house and the garden, as it were, from above, and it shows the garden area in green as 72 square metres. Could you confirm, Alex, does that include the front garden area and the rear garden area, bearing in mind that the rear garden area is largely taken up by bicycle parking? Could you clarify that, please?
Thank you. Just to clarify, all of the green area amounts to the 72 square metres, notwithstanding the position of the cycle stores. It would still be in excess of the standards we would require for a family home, i.e. 50 square metres.
Thank you. Could I follow up on that, Alison?
Yes,
thank you. On a completely unrelated point, the report refers to the Kingston Town Neighbourhood Conservation Area Advisory Committee comment. Should that not refer to the Surbiton? I assume that refers to the Surbiton one. Could you just clarify that, please? I thought you might have brought that out in your presentation, but thank you.
Apologies. Yes, that is a typographical error, and that should refer to the Surbiton Neighbourhood Conservation Area. Apologies.
Okay, thank you. Councillor White, you wanted to ask a question?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you. My main question was the same as Liz's about the lifetime home standards. So thank you for answering that already. The other thing, I just wanted a sort of clarification again. I know you've said it in your report, that the difference between this application and the previous application in the sort of sense of distances and light and everything, you suggest that there's actually very little different, in which case it would be extremely hard for us to decide to refuse. Is that correct?
In terms of positioning, sorry, Councillor White, I lost a bit of your question there. Could you repeat it, please?
Sorry, I'm having lots of trouble as well. I'm losing everybody too. How different is this application to the previous one? Because they sort of internally it's different, but how different? A planning point of view, and does it make it more difficult for us to consider to refuse, as it had already been agreed?
Yes, as I alluded to previously, the principle of residential development on this site has already been established due to the previous approval. It isn't much different in terms of its plot coverage to that was previously approved for the flatted development.
Does that answer your question, Councillor White? Yeah. So the next on the list is Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Chair. My questions have been answered. Liz asked a question, Sharon asked on the glass, and Malcolm asked on the garden space. So thank you very much, Madam Chair.
All right, thank you very much. Councillor Yoganathan.
Hello, Alex. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes. I think most of my questions been asked, and you answered very well indeed. I just wanted to make it clear. You said 2018, 4-bedroom development flat. It was agreed, was it?
Correct, yes.
Beautiful. And then you also said that one, you know, this is our ward. You see, I've been there since 2002, so as Liz. We know the area very well. We can listen to all the things on a practical basis. My question is, I am happy, you know, there is something coming. Most of the question asked, and I think it's a family development is a very important one for us. We would love to have more flats, but the flats is gone out of the window. So at least you're having a family homes. That's a good news. So it's a 5-bedroom one. Only thing I was concerned about is, I think Sharon touched it. If the development, the owner said, I can do it in 2 months, is that true? And if so, how do we maintain minimum disruption to all those flat dwelling and a lot of families living in that part of the world? Please.
Thank you, Councillor. As you will have seen from the officer's report, we have a condition number 10, which is a pre-commencement condition that alludes to the requirement of a construction management plan. So before any construction could begin, we would have to see evidence that construction would be done in a safe and neighbourly way, minimising disruption to neighbouring properties and the surrounding highway network.
Thank you, Alex. I think it's if you can switch your microphone off when you're not, just that's what the feedback. So that's great. Thank you. I just had, if I could have a question. I think that's everyone else has had their question before we go on to comments. I just had a question, and that's to do with the parking and access to even visitor parking. How would a house be able to move in and move out again if you're not able to have a parking space, even a sort of temporary parking space? I just wondered how that would work.
You're correct in that they wouldn't have the opportunity to gain a parking permit, but for temporary site access, such as moving in or for deliveries, I believe that would be possible given the restrictions on the road as existing.
Okay, thank you. That was just and when I was reading through the papers, that was an observation. All right, so I think we've finished on the questions, unless anyone else wants to and ask any other questions. I just wanted to move on to the rest of the debate and any comments. I know that Councillor Green and Councillor Falchicos-Sumner said they would like to make some comments in their original question time. Would you like to, Councillor Green, do you want to make a comment now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Excuse me. Overall, I think that this is an acceptable development. I think that the location at the moment is an unutilised space, which is a shame. We know we need more housing. I think it's an attractive looking building. I'm very pleased to see in the conditions there about the materials, because that's really important, that the materials are the right materials to be able to match in with the very attractive buildings that are there at the moment. With in mind the fact that it had planning permission for the flats, I think that even if I was minded to refuse it, I think it would be extremely hard to come up with a reason to refuse it. It was the lifetime home standard that I wanted the clarification on. That's obviously a building regulations matter, as Alex has explained. So therefore, it's not for this planning committee to look at a building regulations. That will take place afterwards with more detailed plans should it gain permission. But essentially, I think that it's a very attractive looking building that will mix nicely in with what is there. I do think the amenity space is small, as Councillor Self has said, but I do think that that's not a reason to refuse it. In response to Councillor Falchkos-Sumner, some of the houses, particularly in North Road, which backs onto, which runs parallel with St Philip's, are single dwellings again. I remember one where they converted it back from 4 flats into a single dwelling. So there are a few of them that will have that amenity space that is mixed, because you've got the rear falling away and the semi-basement. I know some on my own road up in Surbiton Hill Park, up in Berrylands, that have that as well, and are single dwelling houses. So I think overall, it's an acceptable development, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say, and I think that we should permit it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Falchkos-Sumner, do you want to make your comments?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think everyone can agree that this parcel of land needs to be developed. At the moment, it is empty. It's been partially excavated, and there is room for development. I don't think there's any question of that. And usually, we are arguing or debating whether something is dense enough, because normally the argument is always planning officers telling, we're going, it's too dense, and planning officers going, no, it has to be this dense, it has to abide by planning policy. And so it's rather unusual, and I will use this in future meetings, by the way. It's rather unusual that we're arguing that it doesn't matter that it's not dense enough, that it doesn't meet the PTAL requirements, or even the MPPF requirements for us having a tilted balance. So I will make reference to this in future applications, because if we can override it once, we can override it again. I feel, for me, I disagree on the look of it. I think when you look down that road and when you look at the plans, I think if it was adjoined, I agree it would be perfectly acceptable and would fit in well. Because it does match, it's not an unattractive building. But I feel because it is set away, for me, it interrupts this street scene, because everything else is adjoined. And so for that to me, I think it will stick out a bit like a sore thumb. I'm not sure what you need to do about that. That's not for me to say. I'm just making a comment. And in some respects, I think to have a different design would have perhaps taken away some of that niggly thing for me. I just think because everything else is adjoined and we've taken a similar plan but made it detached, it doesn't quite sit comfortably. But that's personal opinion on design. I am concerned that we are effectively going to build a family home with an extremely small garden, which has been raised, in an area where we have a lot of one-bedroom flats. My concern is what happens to this property in the future, and if the committee are minded to pass this, is there any way we can add a planning condition that it is not used for HMO in futures? I think, and so that would be one question that I would like, if there is a planning condition that would do that. I think that would take away some of the neighbours' concerns as well. And yeah, so they are my main things. I don't think it fits in well, but I don't know what you do with that. The frosted windows things, we've already raised planning conditions. And to be fair, this new law about planning conditions, I know you say they have to come back to them, but I read the Act and we can't refuse. So they can come back and say, no, we want to build till 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday. We can't refuse whether they put in the application or not. We have. So I don't know, I'm asking if there's any way of shoring up that to make it more convenient for the neighbours and less intrusive in case they do use the business and planning bill. So really, are there two conditions we can put in? One, to stop it being used as a HMO in future, and two, to try and shore up this planning condition regarding site access and times which can be constructed. Because we do not, if you read the bill, we can't refuse. We can't refuse if they come and ask us to change the times.
Okay. Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Self. Would you like to make comment?
Thank you, Chair. I'll make my questions. I think it would be useful if the officer could answer Councillor Falchkos-Sumner's question about putting a condition in to prevent, or a legal agreement to prevent, future conversion of this family house to an HMO. I don't mind whether the officer does that, or I can ask my questions which are unrelated to that. But should I just go ahead with my questions? But I would like to hear the answer from the officers to Councillor Foucher, because someone has suggested a question on that.
Yeah, well, we were, it was more the comments we were at this point, but yes, I have noted it down as something to go back. But okay. I can ask now. Alex, can you answer the question, or Barry, about the planning, whether we can put a condition in about a house of multiple occupancy and the site access, if we can make that a little bit tighter. I mean, I suppose the site access is all to do with the COVID guidance, and that may well change as it goes on anyway. It depends when construction starts. But can you answer those questions?
Alex, if I can just quickly respond.
Sure.
The planning and business bill is obviously in early stages in the House and will be amended and can be amended, but the proposed section 74C would allow a local authority to refuse to modify any condition. So what the provisions, if you look at section 74C of the proposed bill, if a person makes an application in accordance with section 74B to the local planning authority, the authority may, by notice in writing to the person, sub B, refuse to modify the condition. So it's not a foregone conclusion. It has to go through a process, and the local authority would, in making a decision, decide whether it would be acceptable in planning terms. Members will be aware that this Act comes hot on the heels of the written ministerial statement by Secretary of State Jenrick 2-3, last month sometime, where he, in his written ministerial statement, asked local authorities to be pragmatic in dealing with construction working hours and for applicants to apply. And then we have had applications in the borough to extend construction hours, and where they are in areas of sensitive nature, we have refused them. So it is not a foregone conclusion. Turning to the house in multiple occupation question, we would have to ask, what is it we are trying to protect against? Because a house in multiple occupation is a house that allows adults to live together as a non-family unit. And what would be the harm by allowing a group of people to live together in a non-family unit? Of course, if they're looking for a large HMO, that would have to go through the planning application process, and we'll be able to assess it. So if one was going above 6 people, that would have to go through a planning application. If you're going between 3 and 6, really, we would have to question what the harm would be in that small house in multiple occupation. I hope that covers it, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Malcolm, do you, Councillor, do you want to continue?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. My comments really relate to the design of this property, which are going to conflict. My comments are going to conflict with each other. The look of this product, of this proposal, fits in well with the neighbouring properties. It's been designed so that if you're driving along, or indeed walking along, or even cycling along the road, you can look across to the property, and it would, I think, fit in well with the neighbouring properties. So from that point of view, I agree with, that I think it's well designed. However, I think there's reasons to refuse this application on design grounds, not on what it looks like from the front, but the fact that there's intrinsic faults with the design. I will expand. This house has been designed with, as the applicant spoke earlier, with steps up to the front door, as indeed Victoria mansions were often built all that time ago. It is not beyond the wit of modern architects to design a building still with steps up to a front door, even although it might be a mock front door or a front door that is not used frequently, and have access via a ramp or whatever to the side, which is where the real front door is, if you like. And that could be a much less grand structure, but visually from the front, you see the steps up to the front door. in practice, you have a ramp up to the side to a side door, which allows proper wheelchair access. This, with building control, this scheme as proposed, the design of it does not allow our building control officers, or indeed any other private building control company that happens to be overseeing this, to come up with a scheme to allow good wheelchair access. So I think it's poorly designed. I also absolutely detest the fact that we've got bin stores in the front of a family house. I live in a family house in Berrylands, and we keep our bins. Do you know where we keep them? We keep them around the back of the house, and then on bin day, which is tomorrow, so we wheel our bins around and put them out for the bin men to collect. Why can't these why can't these occupants do the same? It's a family house. It's not a block of flats. It's not an HMO. The bins should not be at the front. They should be to the rear. Yes, that would take up more of the garden area. I'll go on to that. The garden area has been, I say, contrived to be 72 square metres. It includes every little tiny bit of available space to the front and the rear, part of which I already mentioned is taken up by cycle parking. At the front, you've got a contrived space going around the bay window. Clearly, that's not going to be used for people sitting out in their front garden having a barbecue, I would suggest, or indeed for any other amenity use. So I would suggest that the real garden area is less than 50 square metres. Probably we're completely stuffed on planning grounds on that, in that the applicants managed to contrive an area that's 72 square metres. It is nevertheless contrived, and it's just, to me, it's not acceptable. So I can't see how I could support this. My final point is on parking. We had an application come to the Development Control Committee last week in Corcoran Road that had previously been to the Surbiton Neighbourhood Committee for the demolition of existing properties and building 9 detached houses. The applicant on that had put in 29 car parking spaces up from my recall, and the committee decided to knock that back via a condition to only, in inverted commas, 18 spaces for the 9 houses. And the reason for that given was absolutely people living in detached houses in Surbiton will have cars and will want somewhere to park. So we seem to have one argument put one week and one to the second week. Yes, this is a lot closer to Surbiton Station, but the Corcoran Road one's about 5 minutes walk from Surbiton Station. So I just fail to see that this is really a family house. I'll end there. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Self. Next, I've got Councillor Beenan.
Thanks, Chair. It was just about, I think, in relation to what something Councillor Fletcher-Summers said in terms of the density, and that we're kind of, in a sense, restricting density in this instance. I mean, I think, from my understanding, is we've initially there were going to be flats which will have more families, and that's not something that we can. That was the initial proposal, and that was turned down because of the restricted covenant. So I don't think it's kind of out of our control to a certain degree, and I think that was the original proposal. And similarly, I don't think we should necessarily be restricting HMOs, as that would potentially have be a higher density solution. So I think the reason why it's lower density, and the reason why this is different to maybe other applications where we've been where it's been a lot denser, is a lot down to the fact that we have this restricted covenant, and I don't know if we need to be putting any other restrictions in place that might reduce that. So those were my points. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Beenan. And next I've got Councillor Green. You want to come back on?
It was a very minor point, but just to say, when I was researching the history of how we have St Philip's car park, where they very sadly in 1960 something knocked down 2 of the properties that were on St Philip's Road to create the access to the car park. The first one of those was actually a detached house, I seem to remember. So it was a detached house at the end before it went into the semis that now are left. Although, as they knocked down half a semi, opposite it is a detached house as well, because they knocked half of it down. Very minor point of history.
Okay, thank you for that comment. And Councillor Sumner, you want to come back on the officer response?
Thank you, Chad. Yeah, I just wasn't clear. Sorry, my camera keeps fading in and out. I wasn't quite clear whether the officer was saying that we can't put a restriction on it being used in the future as a HMO, or that he didn't think it was desirable to do so. And so I was just following up on that. With reference to Councillor Bainan's points about being a restricted covenant. Restricted covenant is not a planning matter. It's not anything to be considered at a planning committee. So it isn't actually relevant to deciding whether we pass planning or not. So, because obviously that's a legal matter between two parties. So it isn't really relevant to this application in that respect. But so, yeah, so I actually do think there is a benefit for looking at to restrict a HMO being on site, because I feel that, having spoken to some local people, that is one of their concerns. And if we're being, forced to accept something, which I agree with Councillor Self, I think there are grounds to reject it. But if we're being, pushed into a position of accepting this, and don't we do our best to make it as acceptable to the other residents as possible? Isn't that really our duty as councillors? And if that would be one of the ways of doing that, then I would see that as a positive compromise.
Okay, thank you. I now got Councillor Abraham.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one question to the officers in relation to this property. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is the site that is having the green boarding. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. We've got car parking in front, spaces in front there. If the frontage of this house is going to be facing where those cars are parked, then we are losing those spaces. I am concerned about that. Already I know the road, I know St. Philip's Road very well, and I think parking space is a nightmare. Now, also, this is a family house of 5. You're telling me that nobody's going to have a car in this particular property? Where are they going to park? I mean, I am concerned about, it may not be a planning issue, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I am concerned that means there's going to be a crossover there. That space will go completely where that car is. So I'd like clarification, please. Thank you.
Alex, can you clarify?
Yes, just to respond to Councillor Abraham's point, we wouldn't be losing that on-street car parking space because the scheme is car-free, so no crossover would be required for the new dwelling.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I find that very hard to accept here. Thank you.
Okay, I've got Councillor Bainan. You wanting to make a comment or a question?
Well, kind of comment straight question. Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just following up on what Councillor Falchkoff-Summers said. Thank you for explanation. But I'm just in terms of our position as on the development committee and the decision made today regarding the usage. We know that, well, previously when this was approved, it got declined because, as I understand it, because of the legal issue. So if we were to decline it today, hypothetically, because we didn't think it should be a house, then surely the same thing would happen again. So I'm just wondering where we surely we must kind of take that into account or not, or are we supposed to completely ignore it? Because otherwise we were kind of caught in a vicious cycle, I guess. So I'm just wondering, maybe looking for clarification on that from maybe one of the officers, if possible. Thank you.
Can I come back on that, Councillor, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
So generally, private land matters are not a planning consideration. However, deliverability is a planning consideration. So we clearly have an example here where we have evidence that any other development than this would not be deliverable because of other legal constraints. So there would be a question of deliverability. We wouldn't be able to add it into our 5-year housing land supply because of questions of deliverability. Therefore, we're in a situation where we're asking for what we can get at this point in time, which is the proposal in front of us. Just if I can respond back to a point about houses and multiple occupation and the condition attached. the National Planning Practice Guidance is clear in as much as it says that if we are taking away rights of a homeowner, we must have jolly good reasons to do so. So I think if members are looking at taking away rights for somebody to go to a small scale HMO, that would really have to be justified for the reasons for imposing such a condition. Because of course, an applicant is at will to appeal to the Secretary of State to overturn a condition, and then we'd have to go into bat and we'll have to demonstrate why the council decided to remove those rights. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Shaper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I just wanted to echo Councillor Abraham's concern about the parking. I mean, I'm looking at the plan, and I just wanted to get a point of clarification really on the area in front of the house. So I understand that there isn't going to be a loss of parking, but is there anything in place that would prevent the occupants of the house for applying for a parking space on the road? Is that permissible, or is that completely out of the question?
Alex, do you want to? I mean, my understanding is that there is a condition that's was partly what the question I asked about the permit. So, Alex, do you want to clarify that?
Yes, as I said, the applicant has agreed to enter into a legal agreement to prevent any future occupants obtaining car parking permits. So they wouldn't be able to apply for any car parking spaces on the street, and no crossover would be required. Therefore, we wouldn't lose any on-street car parking capacity. So I just wanted to clarify that. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Sharper.
I think it's probably the way I asked it. What I meant was, can the occupants park a car outside the house if there's no loss of parking? If it's not permit parking, it's open for anyone to park. With pot luck, would they, if they had a car, would they just, be able to park outside if there was a space? I think that's what I was trying to get at.
No, because there is a single yellow line the other side of the permit bay.
Okay, I've got Councillor White. You've got a question? Oh, sorry, a comment actually.
A comment, yes. This is my part of town. It's where I've lived since I moved here and brought up my family here. I'm almost alone amongst our original friends still here, because else had to move up to Berrylands or elsewhere to get the nice build into Surbiton Hill to get the nice big houses. I think it's a really, really important asset for us to have a really nice 5-bedroom family house. I also think we slightly underestimate the sort of the impact of Hillary's portfolio. I think there are a lot of families locally who are happy to embrace the no car way forward, and this has got a PTAL of 5. There is nowhere better to actually live without a car, and I think that there'll be many families trying to move into this and very happy that they don't have a car parking space.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I've got to the end of the comments. I'm not hearing any particular, or not sure if anyone wants to put forward additional conditions. I know things have been suggested, but is there formally wanting something to put forward and take to a vote, or are we going to go to the vote on the overall to accept or refuse?
Chair, may I request we go to a vote on the original motion, the original proposal that you proposed at the start of this, which is to permit this application.
Thank you very much. Okay, so if we can now move to the vote, Martin, can you call? I'm assuming we're going to go to the vote.
Yes,
and they wouldn't. Yeah, so if you can do the roll call to go through that.
Yeah, just to mention to members before we do conduct the votes. Obviously, there has been 1 or 2 connection problems this evening. I'm aware that 1 or 2 members have dropped in and out just for microseconds. Just to say, if any members are aware they've missed any parts of the debate, they should consider whether or not they would take part in the vote. Okay, we'll now call each member in order, and if you could state you're either in favour of the motion, and that motion is to approve consent for this scheme subject to the conditions and the informative set out in the officer's report. So I'll be asking you to either say you're in favour, against, or abstain. So, Councillor Bainham?
I'll confirm I have been logged in throughout the whole meeting, and I vote for.
Councillor Folder-Hughes?
Logged in throughout the meeting and in favour.
Councillor Falshikov-Sumner?
I was here for the entire meeting and I'm against.
Councillor Abraham?
I was here for the entire meeting and I'm for. Thank you.
Councillor Sharper?
I was here for the entire meeting and I'm for. Thank you.
Councillor Sweeney? Councillor Sweeney?
Sorry. Yeah, I've had a few connection problems, but I think the majority of the meeting I was here, and I'm in favour.
Councillor Green?
Here for the entire meeting and for.
Councillor White?
Here for the entire meeting and for.
Councillor Yoganathan?
I've been here for the whole meeting and I'm for, please.
Councillor Gander?
Throughout the meeting, listening to the debate, and I'm for.
Councillor Holt?
I confirm that I've been here for the whole meeting and I'm for.
And Councillor Self?
I confirm I've been here throughout and I vote against.
Okay, thank you. So, Chair, that's 10 votes for and 2 votes against. So that motion is approved.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, can I raise a point of order, please?
Okay, Councillor.
Councillor Sweeney has declared he wasn't there for the entire meeting. He was here for the majority of the meeting. So, according to planning law, his vote can't be registered.
Okay. Martin,
Sorry, I'll just let Councillor Sweeney confirm his appearance at the meeting this evening. I know he did drop out for some microseconds at times. I did notice that myself.
If it saves time, I'm happy to not vote on this. What do you advise, please?
If you feel that you have missed any part of the debate, then you really shouldn't take part in the vote.
Okay, I will not take part in the vote then.
Okay, thank you. So, Chairman, that is 9 votes for, 2 votes against, and Councillor Sweeney not voting. So that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. So that is agreed. We'll now move on to the second application of the evening, which is a consultation, and it's on 127 Chiltern Drive and Chiltern Works. This is a consultation, so it's just part of the process. We will have we've got a number of people who have want to come along and to speak this evening. We've got 2 people who are with the applicant, and there's we've got 4 members of the public who have registered to speak as well. So I just wanted to say that for me, this is a time for us to consider the application. We're not going to determine it. It's going to be determined at the development control meeting later in the year. But it's just an opportunity for the applicant to come along and to make their case, and for the objectors to or the people, the registered residents to come along and speak, and for the councils to make their comments as well, and these comments will then be taken forward to into the papers for the development control meeting later. I just wanted to at this point say that I need to remind members that when an application is submitted to a neighbourhood committee for consultation, any member who is also a member of the development control committee can sit in on the debate and ask for points to be clarified, but must not express a view on the application or take part in the decision. So you can take part. It's just that you it's not expressing a view and taking part in any decision. And also that a member who has commented on the consultation at a neighbourhood committee and who then attends the meeting of the Development Control Committee considering the application as an alternate member must not take part in the consideration of that application. As this is a consultation, I will ask the developers to make their presentations first and then ask the planning officer to comment, following which I will allow members of the committee to make comments before opening the meeting to questions and comments from the public. At the end of the meeting, a list of the points will be forwarded from this committee to the Development Control Committee, which will decide on the application. Once members of the public have had an opportunity to speak, the committee will discuss the application, firstly to ask questions and then to comment. If questions arise, I will then ask the planning officer, if appropriate, or the applicant's agents presenting the application to respond. So if that process is clear to everyone, I'll ask the first applicant to present the development proposal. Have we got?
Sorry, can I butt in? Can I I'm sorry, as chair. I'm on myself and Malcolm being on DCC. Is this where we should be? Turning our videos off and not partaking.
Well, it's so what it was saying that you can sit in on the debate and you can ask for points to be clarified, but not to express a view on the application or take part in the decision.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Sorry to butt in. Thanks. There was a request for a comfort break by another member. I don't know if that's, it's a good time to have it now. But I'll point it out. Thank you,
Madam Chair. Isn't there a point of order on this? I was under the impression that Councillor Bainan is not allowed to take part. Councillor Self said he's removed himself, so I think that should be the same because he sits on DCC like Councillor Self. I thought that was the position. I can let Martin clarify.
Can I raise an alternative point of order, please? And Councillor Hart, I think you're doing an amazing job chairing, but I do feel the advice you've been given isn't actually legally correct. Okay. If you refer to Holborn versus Hackney, which took place last month, and it was a judgment, it clearly stated that councillors were entitled to comment, hold opinions, and even actively express their views to residents and to developers and still make decisions at DCC. This was a legal judgment that took place in June. It also stated that the Article 10 of the Human Rights Act for freedom of speech overweighs any council rules in terms of standing orders, and it upheld that in a court of law last month. And so I do feel we should be keeping concurrent with judgments. And although it wasn't their reason for overturning the planning application, it was overturned on a different reason, the judge made specific reference to this. And the information given is also contrary to the Localism Act.
Okay, thank you for that. I don't know if there's an officer who wants to, Martin or Barry wants to comment on that judgment. I mean, I think there is, for me, I don't see there's not a reason not to take part in the debate. That certainly, I suppose it's just a question of how strongly you make your view, and we're not making a decision as such. We're only taking points forward to the DCC. But Martin, would you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I can't comment on a recent judgment. I'm not aware of the details of that, but certainly the the advice that we are given to this committee and also to the other committees that are considering consultation items is that as you said yourself, Chair. So any member who's also a member of DC can sit in on the debate and ask for points to be clarified, but must not express a view on the application or take part in the decision. And it is a predetermination issue, of course. It's to safeguard members against any accusations that they've made their mind up before that application is determined at the Development Control Committee.
Okay. All right. So I've also been asked, or is it on the chat? I know it's probably is that the meeting has gone on for a little while now, longer than on that first application. Do we would it be appropriate to have an adjournment for a comfort break just now? Is that, yep? So if we can, Martin, can we move to an adjournment for a period of time for a comfort break?
Yes, Chair. Do you wish to have a 5 minutes break, and we can then just suspend the live stream?
Is 5 minutes enough for everyone? If we, so it's at 21:11 by my clock. So if we come back at 16 minutes past.
16, yeah.
Yep. Is that okay? 16 minutes past.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we are live again. It just needs to ensure Councillor Falchikoff-Sumner is with us.
Present.
Okay, Chair, everyone is here that needs to be here.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Can you do a roll call, please?
Indeed. So, Councillor Bainan.
Present.
Councillor Foley-Hughes.
Present.
Councillor Falchikoff-Sumner.
Present.
Councillor Abraham.
Present.
Councillor Schaefer.
Present.
Councillor Sweeney.
Present.
Councillor Green.
Present.
Councillor White.
Present.
Councillor Yoganathan.
Present, sir.
Councillor Gander.
Present.
Councillor Holt.
Present.
Councillor Self.
Present.
Okay, we are good to go.
Thank you, Martin. When we broke off for adjournment there, Councillor Self had put that he wanted to speak. So if you'd like to say, speak now, Councillor Self.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Falchikoff-Sumner has raised a point about members of development control being able to participate in this evening, and in that she is absolutely correct. The legislation is quite clear to me that, and they've introduced more. Well, I don't know when it was introduced more recently. The fact that councillors that sit on planning committees can be predisposed towards aspects of an application. They must not predetermine their application. So if, for example, I were to be sitting on a planning committee to determine an item, it would be, and I had an interest to declare because I, for example, lived immediately next to the application site or something like that, I would declare that interest and would then have to remove myself from the room, which in the virtual case means remove myself from the meeting, turn the thing right off. With this is a different matter. We are allowed to be predisposed, so I've said that I will not participate in that. That is absolutely my right to do that. I will give an example, maybe for Councillor Falchikoff-Sumner's benefit, of why I'm doing that. The reason is that we are allowed to be predisposed. So if a councillor that sits on development control was taking part tonight and took part in the consultation item, he or she could say, for example, I'm predisposed to say that I really think that development this site is absolutely right and we should be developing this site because we need more houses, etc., etc. That's okay, provided you don't predetermine the application and say, yes, I'm definitely going to approve this, or I definitely am not, I'm definitely going to vote to refuse it. For me, this is my personal decision, and I'm absolutely entitled to make my personal decision. I think it's a lot clearer if I don't participate in the consultation this evening and say, and give views on it. That doesn't mean to say that I'm going to remove myself from the room, in that I will turn my video off, I will turn my microphone off, but I will be listening to what is said. That sets out my position. Councillor Bainan also sits on development control. He is entitled, if he wishes, he can listen and he can make comments provided he doesn't predetermine it. Thank you, Chair. I will now turn my mic and video off. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Self. So I think if everyone is clear, obviously Councillor Self has made himself very clear on what he thinks his position is, and so I think that is for everyone to decide themselves. So if we can carry on now with the meeting, and I've got Alan Evans from RBK Planning and Naomi Lee from On Architecture to speak, to present for the development proposal. I know that you've been told that you've got up to 5 minutes. It's at the chair's discretion how much you get, but for me it's probably that I would like, that you obviously as concise as possible. It's up to 5 minutes, and obviously not it's giving us an opportunity to put forward your case. So if I just asked you to, I don't know who's going to start, whether you're going to both speak or one at a time or whatever, but I'll let you start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I will just share my screen with you. If you give me a second. Right, if you can all see that, I will commence the presentation. Thank you for your time. The brief and the proposal for the development site is to reflect the development plan aspiration for housing-led redevelopment. It will also include replacement commercial employment floor space, along with high-quality landscaping and vehicle parking. There are a number of opportunities presented by the site, and also constraints which we've taken into account. We are proposing to utilise the existing pedestrian and shared vehicular access. The topography of the site means that the ground floor of the proposed development is considerably lower than the houses on Surbiton Hill Park and the flats on Chiltern Drive. And the railway line running parallel to the northern boundary of the site creates a physical barrier to that. I'm just going to pass you on to Naomi, who will run through some of the design development.
Thanks, Alan. The scheme has been developed through ongoing consultation with a variety of stakeholders, as you can see displayed on the screen right now. And we've continuously refined the proposal, specifically reducing height and mass in many areas. High quality architectural detailing material palettes have been selected as an ongoing priority following feedback and ensuring the scheme offers a positive and attractive addition to the Berrylands area. The scheme has been developed to ensure overlooking to existing residents is minimised, and where possible balconies are not facing adjacent rear gardens, and proposed habitable spaces such as living kitchen areas have been orientated to overlook the scheme's amenity space and away from the neighbouring gardens. Proposed amenity space is overlooked by the new homes sharing the space, engendering a sense of ownership among new residents and enabling them to become part of the existing Berrylands community. The scheme seeks to enlist sustainable principles through construction and design. High quality design of outdoor space has been central to the application, with new landscaped communal play space, gardens, biodiversity enhancements, and also providing over 100 secure cycle parking spaces to encourage sustainable methods of transport. Safety, wayfinding and connection to the surrounding area were key to the proposal's design to ensure the scheme knits successfully into the existing community and townscape fabric, whilst providing much needed high quality homes for the borough. I'll pass you back to Alan.
Thank you, Naomi. A number of changes from the proposals have resulted from the consultation undertaken thus far. The scheme layout has been amended. We've increased the provision of family housing proposed and introduced renewable energy technology, including an air source heat pump. A number of planning policy elements are met and exceeded, reflecting the local authority master plan aspiration for the site within the local plan for housing-led redevelopment. There is a specific and detailed green commitment that's been made by the applicant Bugler Homes, including the provision of air source heat pumps and photovoltaic panels to ensure that the carbon footprint of the development is minimised and the high quality energy strategy is provided. In summary, the proposal seeks to deliver 56 new dwellings just shy of 300 square metres. Thank you. Commercial flexible floor space, which is designed specifically not to compete with existing established businesses, but to complement that. Provision of affordable housing will also be sought within the proposal. There is an aspiration to deliver a number of family dwellings in the proposal. There's also an obligation to deliver a net gain in biodiversity through the development. The use of, as I said, an air source heat pump and photovoltaic panels to have a communal heating system, and combined with special measures to ensure that water consumption is minimised. And there are proposed to be 28 car parking spaces and 119 secure cycle spaces. I'm happy to field any questions that any of you may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I was just going to ask Alex if she wants to make some comments now, or have got any comments on what's been said.
Thank you, Chair. It would just be useful for all those listening to give a very brief synopsis of the proposal. So just to clarify and possibly reiterate some points made by the developer team, the proposal is for 56 residential units, and that comprises, at this point in time, 10 affordable units, 288 square metres of commercial floor space is proposed, a total of 28 car parking spaces, 119 cycle parking spaces, and communal and private amenity space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Alex, for that. I just wanted to ask members of the committee if they've got anything they would like to make comment on in the presentation. If you could indicate in the chat. That I've got, just looking, I've got Councillor Sumner. Would you like to speak first?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a number of questions, so I'm happy to give way to somebody else if they have fewer number in case we double go through them, but I have a number of questions for the applicant, and then I have questions for planning.
Yeah, I would, as long as it's not a long list. I mean, it's just for the applicant. If it's a long list and you so that would be the only proviso, is that how many questions is it, and so that they'll be able to remember. So that would be my only comment, and then maybe we can deal with the Alex ones later. So if you split them that way, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the developers agent for speaking earlier. I've got a couple of questions on the background information that was supplied, and also on some of the things you've said today, and really helped me to understand a lot better the thinking behind some of this. So in respect to the
yes,
I can't find. Sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Sumner, it was just I think someone had unmuted, so just carry on.
Oh, that's fine. I've looked through these plans, and I've looked through them in detail, and I can't find any reference to the actual height from basement up to the ridge. So I would like to know the actual height of both the buildings from basement upwards, please. So I note in your feasibility study that you've got 56 sprinklers in, so that's one per property. Will there be any in communal areas? I also note in your presentation, you talked about biodiversity net gain, but then you mentioned energy saving measures, which are obviously nothing to do with biodiversity net gain. So I'd really appreciate to fully understand how you are going to achieve biodiversity net gain rather than just environmental conservation measures. If you refer to, again, the viability assessment, it makes mentions of two different specs. You've got an intermediate spec and a private sale spec. So that's 20 units of one and 36 of another. So that raises questions with me regarding the affordable homes provision. where are the affordable homes going to be located? Obviously, Kingston Council has a zero corridor policy. So are they going to be peppercorned throughout the development? So that's one question raising from that. And also just really questioning why you're having two different levels of specification in your internal specifications. Referring once again to the viability assessment, you make note that you're going to do 31 units need ensuite bathroom facilities at a cost of £108,000. But if you go through the plans, it might be my misinterpretation of the plans, but I can only spot 13 units with en-suites, they're the 3 bedrooms, and an additional 3, which are the disabled units, which I commend you for doing, by the way. But that is included elsewhere in the viability assessment. So I'm just trying to understand what the difference is between the 31 units and the 13 units that I found. And it might just be me not reading it correctly. On the viability assessment, again, your cost per square metre for the development you're saying is £2,658, whereas if you refer to the architectural architects for London, they have an average of £1,750 for a similar type development. So I'd like to know why it's costing £1,000 more per square metre. The other reference is in relation to the ecology survey, which I read. Really pleased it was in there. However, it did say that additional surveys were needed. It clearly stated we needed additional surveys for bats, badgers as well, and they're not there at the moment. So will they be there by the time it goes to development control? And thirdly, again on ecology, there is no mention in the environmental, in the ecology report about standing water, and particularly to amphibian surveys. As we all know, a few hundred yards away, we've got the standing water across the Thames water. So I was really surprised that there was no mention whatsoever of that standing water. Now, as some people here may know, it is a requirement if there's standing water that there is amphibian surveys, and that isn't in there. So again, will that be delivered before DCC? I think that's it for questions. Just let me double check. Sorry, I did say I had a few. Services, affordable homes, height sprinklers. No, thank you. That's my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. Is it Alan or Naomi that wants to answer these questions?
Thank you, Chair. I'll kick off. I was sort of writing them as I received them, and also sort of trying to answer them in my head at the same time. So I think I've got each of the questions, but forgive me if I've missed something, and please remind me if so. Just to clarify, there are no basement. There is no basement accommodation proposed with the development. The proposal is 22.3 metres high. Both the blocks from the ground floor to the parapet on the roof. The entire ground area of the site beyond the internal floor space footprint of the buildings is effectively communal areas, and that is split into soft landscaping and also hard landscaping, as well as vehicle parking and circulation areas. The planning application itself provides some detail, and I'd expect there to be any conditions attached to a planning permission that would require specific details in terms of the layout of the common areas proposed. The biodiversity net gain will be achieved through various measures, not least including incorporation of bird and bat boxes, as well as enhancing open space. At the moment, the site has almost a zero biodiversity footprint, and the various surveys that have been submitted and undertaken as part of the planning application do also demonstrate that. We have a policy requirement which the applicant is more than happy to entertain, and that is the carbon neutral contribution or the drive towards a carbon neutral scheme, which, as I mentioned, will be done through both renewable energy technologies and also through the fabric, the building fabric itself. The applicant is, as well as a housing contracting company. They build the schemes, so rather than just getting a planning consent and selling it, the applicant regularly build, and so are very well versed in terms of ensuring that the carbon footprint of the proposals are in line with the latest policy. There's a few questions on viability, which I'll run through now. In terms of the mix of tenure, there is a policy requirement to have a different type of affordable housing offer within the proposal, both for intermediate products like share ownership accommodation, and also for affordable rented accommodation, which would be in line with the identified London affordable rental level. I will need to ask the quantity surveyor who's undertaken the pricing schedule in terms of the figure for the provision of ensuite bathrooms in that. I note the point you've made in terms of the 13 units being shown, so perhaps that's something I'm going to get in touch with him this evening, but we can provide that information in due course. That's everything I had written down. Naomi, is there anything you wanted to add on the design points at all?
I think you've covered. I think Councillor Sumner, we may have missed one of your questions.
Yeah, it was just on the location of the affordable homes within the blocks, because we have a policy of zero pour doors. So I just wanted to ensure that they were going to be peppered throughout both blocks and not just put into one. Thank you.
They won't be peppered throughout, but there's affordable accommodation in both of the blocks, and it will be specifically identified as we move through the negotiation with the officers to finalise the provision, the exact number of affordable units within the scheme.
Right, would that be a lower specification then? Would that be the intermediate £6,000 internal specification, or the private sale? Because are the affordable homes going to have a lower specification than the private sales? Because again, I know it may be a minor point, but I do think it's an important point. I think it's great that you do affordable homes, but it would, I would really like it if they were both of the same specification.
Yeah, I mean, it hasn't been determined. Yeah, we probably, well, we do need a planning permission first of all, and we've got a little bit of a journey to go yet on that. So there hasn't yet been a specific tender package that was set out, which type of costing for a detailed finish specification as yet.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I think it's probably. Is there anything, Alex, that you want to come in on that specific point about the look or the location of the affordable accommodation?
Just to clarify that the location of the affordable units would be material to planning. However, the internal specification would not be a material planning consideration.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. I've got looking at my list. I had Councillor White.
Thank you. Just the one question, and I'm coming back to affordable housing, if that's all right. On your slides, which I know we had a very quick run through, it said affordable housing 50% unless justified. And in our notes, it says about 18%. Now, I think this is something that's quite common. We always say that there's not enough affordable housing. So it would be really good if it came in initially as high an acceptable amount.
Yeah, thank you. Noted. We are negotiating that level with the officers currently. There is a an iterative process with all the supporting documentation publicly disclosed, and at the moment that there's an ongoing discussion.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Sweeney.
Okay, I have questions for Alex, but I'll address also for the applicant as well. I'll start with those, and we'll come back to the officer later. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. If you go, well, it depends how many there are, but if you start with the applicant one just now, and then once we've finished, we can maybe come back on the ones for Alex if it's fact.
Okay.
Alex, come back on factual or policy only.
Okay. Yeah, I am one of the councillors for the Berrins ward, which this building is this development is being put forward. It's fair to say that there is a huge amount of concern within the neighbourhood about this development, and we remember we've been kind of through two application cycles, and we had, I think, over 130 objections to the first one before it was withdrawn, and now we have about half that amount as well. There are a number of concerns, but I think one of the primary ones is the prevailing height of this application, which we have a core policies. We have planning strategy policies in Kingston about respecting the prevailing density of surrounding areas. So that policy, I think, was made clear to you. And that the developments need to make a positive contribution to protect and enhance the local character of the area. So the local character of the area is family housing. The local character of the area is, in terms of significant architecture, things like the Berrins pub. And residents have told you that it is too high. So I'm trying to understand, given the council policies and the feedback that you've given to the residents, why you're coming forward with the 7 stories in a residential area where no such height has existed ever.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate the question, and also it does usefully highlight the level of consultation, detailed consultation that we have undertaken as applicants. In terms of enhancing the character of the area, design and appearance and height is a subjective matter. In my opinion, it's the right site, it's the right part of the neighbourhood to optimise the density of development. Again, it's my opinion. I think the contrast that is provided in itself adds to the character of the area. There is the topography of the site, as I referred to earlier, facilitates a increase in building height without having a proportionate impact. You've got a lower starting point, and therefore a higher building can be judged to be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm conscious of time going on, and I'm really aware that we've got some residents who'd like to speak, and so I don't want to keep them for too long. I know I've got a few people in the chat box, but so the key thing for me is to make sure that we all feel that we've had our opportunity to speak. So I'm going to ask Councillor Shepherd to ask a question, her question, and then if you can make it as concise as possible, because I do think I'd quite like to get on to the residents who have come along this evening to speak, and then once we've done that, then we can maybe as members we can then go into further questions if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, Alan, good evening to you. I think as one of the ward councillors, and I'm sure my fellow colleagues would probably agree, we've been rather disappointed with the lack of really sharp illustrations surrounding this application so far. And that's actually quite disappointing in a way, because if we're not getting them, then we can't really, if you like, explain or show that we've fully seen from an illustrative point of view how the buildings are going to look. And obviously, when we're talking with residents, we can only go really on the drawings that we've seen. But I think it would have been nice to have had a few more, if you like, sort of 3D images, a bit more detail, really. And I think as the months go by, I think up until this stage, I think to have requested it really would have been really helpful for us. I think from the western side of the building, particularly looking at the lay of the topography, I think it's important to get a perspective on the height and distance, and you don't really get that from what we've had so far. So I just wanted to make that comment that it would be really appreciated, particularly as ward councillors, if we could have a bit more detail on how it's going to look, and so we can really explain and translate that to residents effectively, and particularly from the row of houses on Surbiton Hill Park. You've got basically low-lying 30-style houses, and despite there being a row of trees in their rear gardens, from the western side, I think particularly, you can get a sense of perspective there, and that's really been lacking so far for us. So I just wanted to give you that point of feedback, really, that we'd like to see a bit more sharper and really just either photographic or something more visual that we can see. And very quickly, the other point is we haven't got a good sense of perspective, apart from 1 or 2 drawings on the entrance and exit points to this proposal, on the pedestrianised area outside the station. That's a really important point for us as well to pick up on. And I'm sure the residents, well, I'm not going to say any more what the residents may or may not say, but from our perspective, I think that would have been really helpful as well. So I just wanted to give that really on a point of feedback to you tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
So I'm just conscious that I would quite like to. The point is that we probably would like some more graphics, and certainly going sort of more information on the perspective of where it would be. So do you want very quickly to come back, Alan, with a comment? But I really would like to just have comments now, and so that I can bring in the residents, and we can have a more further debate later on with the
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Sharp. It's a good point. In very quick response, we have actually we've been working on a 3D model, computer model, so building up all the buildings existing, and then we'll plug in the proposed development, and working on that with officers at Kingston Council at the moment. It's software that they use and that our architect has incorporated into their studio. So we will be able to share very shortly a 3D computer model, which you can literally zoom around and look at it from every angle. So that's some work in progress, and reflects the pre-app, so the application status currently. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I've got a few other people. I don't, Hilary and Shushila, Councillor Gander and Councillor Abraham. Can we? Is yours comments, or are there questions that we could do in the later stage?
To the applicant, it would be, but I'm happy to do it later. It's a question.
Yep. So it's a question, and Councillor Gander, is it a question or a comment?
I'm fine to let residents go first. Yeah, probably would become more of a comment.
Okay. Yeah. That's fine. Okay, so thank you very much. I think probably
my name is there. I will talk after the residents.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, my name is Saskibao under Liz.
Yes, I can see, but I think if we can go to the residents, I think it's really important, because part of this consultation is to get their input, and I'm really want to spend, I know we've said up to 5 minutes, but so we're going to carry on into. I would like to call the first resident who's registered. I've got 4 people who've registered, and I think there's a couple of people who've submitted questions that Martin will read. So if I could say to the residents, I know it's really great that you've come along and registered to speak. If I could just say that, you know, to be as concise as possible, and if you're going to be repeating a point, you know, it's just to do it once, really, just so that we can all get a sense of what all the different points that are being raised. So if I could ask Steve Ayling to come forward first and start your presentation. Yep. Thank you.
Hello. Thanks very much.
Hello. Hi.
Right. So just as a brief introduction, I know there are other speakers, but we are obviously we're speaking on behalf of many of the residents. Originally set up as a subsidiary committee of the Rosewalk Residents Association, but open to involve anyone and everyone, any residents that had any interest in this development, and quickly grew from sort of 50 to now sort of nearly 700 members. And the idea behind setting up the group was to deliver impartial information on the development to residents, and we help to provide research information whilst at the same time liaising with the council, local elected councillors and the developers, and then deliver certain information to the residents. We've collated our information as concisely as we can between speakers, so that we're not overlapping and speaking on different points. The points that we've come up are basically a summary of the main objections and concerns to the application, and we hope that by splitting into speakers, it will split it up so that we're not all covering the same points. Before we start, it needs to be noted really that residents are largely upset for the second submission of the application, which has brought the number of objections down from about 143 to the second application, which is about 63. This is purely because we were largely unable to communicate the resubmission to residents in the normal way that we did, which was by residents' meetings, etc., but because of COVID-19. Feedback tells us we feel it's a little bit unfair, really, because the resubmission was due to a small boundary line, which nobody had mentioned in their original objections, and therefore we feel that a lot of or all of the 143 original comments should still stand. But that being said, main concerns raised should be taken as overall objections rather than those of the individual. These are, like I said, we've collated them and speaking on behalf of as many residents as possible. First point is under the material consideration of privacy. The development of the building, as high as is currently proposed, will inevitably lead to privacy issues for residents of Surbiton Hill Park and Chiltern Drive, which are predominantly made up of 2 to 3 story properties, and these new properties will undoubtedly overlook these residents' homes. Second point is on the loss of light and sunlight. The Kingston core strategy clearly states that development proposals should have regard to the amenities of occupants and neighbours, including in terms of privacy, outlook, sunlight and daylight, avoidance of visual intrusion, noise and disturbance. The development will be a significant intrusion on the visual landscape. Kingston Council clearly stated that the need to maintain the amenities of neighbours in the context of light is in crucial importance, and this development fails to meet these objectives. I'd just like to quickly refer to a section of the RBK, the supplementary planning document, which is the loss of light score, which states that no property should be less of 80% of current levels. Below these, the loss of light should be considered to be adverse. Many properties, or most properties on Surbiton Hill Park and Chiltern Drive, as they are predominantly made up of ground floor to second floor properties, will inevitably fall below this 80% requirement. On the point of safety, it was brought up earlier on, the current access and exit point to the development is a one-way flow measuring approximately 3.5 metres across. There's no footpath currently proposed for residents, causing a major health and safety risk for pedestrians, in particular families with prams, buggies, residents on foot, and
4 minutes.
And very, very importantly, station commuters, including school children. On the point of sewage, Thames Water, having read the report, seem to have no objections. However, residents already aware they are unable to cope with current sewage levels, having opened the storm drain to the Hogs Mill on up to 4 occasions last year. Rosewalk residents have already had 2 incidents this year where raw sewage is backed up into residents' kitchen sinks, and references can be provided where Thames Water had to be called out. So following on from those points, my question is for councillors. What plan do the current councillors or council have in place for the inevitable need to improve our basic infrastructure, apart from the one that we already know of, which is a primary school conversion on Hollyfield Road, beg your pardon.
5 minutes.
Thank you very much for that, Stephen. I'm just going to look to Alex. I know you've asked a question of us, so I've written that down, and all the comments will be taking away anyway. But I don't know if Alex, there's a couple of the ones there that you might want to come back on from a sort of factual point of view or point of policy.
I could clarify the point on infrastructure that was just raised. As part of a development such as this, community infrastructure levy charges would apply, and those charges would go back into the local community for facilities such as education, highways, etc. So this development would be still liable.
Okay, and the points on the loss of light, and do you want to comment on that or leave that to go forward?
What I can say is that the development would be subject to a daylight sunlight assessment, and officers would have to, in their balancing exercise, assess whether any loss of light was considered harmful, along with all the other merits and disbenefits of the scheme.
Okay, thank you, Alex. So can I ask Mel Burrows to come forward and start again? It's I know you've all been chatting to each other and making sure you're not, but if you can be concise and not be repeat, that'd be really helpful. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you, Chair. So following on from the infrastructure and transport piece, the main concern that myself and other residents have here is the impact on firstly schools and then transport and roadways. So in terms of schools, as my friend mentioned there, the schools are already oversubscribed in the area categorically. There is a very small choice of schools. Some of those are religious schools and therefore not open to everybody. Having an additional development just puts additional strain on any of the schools that already have waiting lists in the area. The same can also be noted for doctors, surgeries, dentists, which are not, we don't have any immediately in Berrylands. There is a significant journey to get there. And I think the other point to mention around the schools is leading on to kind of parking and highway safety. Because there are local schools, there is a huge amount of families and children walking about the area. Any additional strain on parking and vehicles and traffic in this area will categorically be a risk to those pedestrians. There is very little, the parking spaces planned for the development area 2856 is simply not enough. The area by Berrylands Station is already congested even outside of rush hour, and I know because I'm a commuter. It is simply an absolute hazard if you're trying to get in or out of that space. The only place to turn at the end of that road is the entrance that you're proposing for this building, and it's unfeasible to have any more traffic around that area. And as has been mentioned before, the surrounding areas, so the overspill onto Chiltern Drive, Surbiton Hill Park, and indeed Rose Walk. I think the final piece for me, and to representing what my neighbours have also said, is the transport infrastructure at Berrylands is already categorically oversubscribed. There are 2 trains an hour into London, and at rush hour they are completely oversubscribed. You're lucky if they're standing room only. In addition to that, the station isn't the most stable. The platforms can get extremely busy and to that point dangerous, especially in the winter time. And I think, you know, the NWR have already confirmed that the structure in Bridge is in need of repair and support. There is no appetite from National Rail to put any extra services on. It's something that people have been campaigning for in this area already, and that has not come to fruition in the 10 years that I've lived here. So those are the kind of main concerns from an infrastructure point of view that I'd like to put forward.
Okay, so that's a question to the applicant then about the impact of the size of the development.
Yes,
is that what you want me
to? The size of development, the extra traffic, and the pressure on schools and public transport.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Alex, is there anything there that you'd like to add?
I have nothing to add to my previous comments. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, right. And so I'd like to call Deborah Elliott. Is that? I'm looking to see if I can. Yeah, not. Is Martin? Is Deborah Elliott? Here?
Sorry, Deborah's here. Glenn Breed's is actually Deborah.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Not a bit
confusing there.
Thank
Sorry.
you. I mean, again, I think the important thing for here is it's really good that you're making the recommendations, but it's questions to the applicant as well. It would be good to have that too. Thank you.
Okay. I'll make it very brief, but I have to say I'm very pleased that Councillor John Sweeney has mentioned the concern regarding the height of these buildings. It is a major concern for the residents of Berrylands. It is something that has been, they've always been 7-storey buildings. The only change that I can see is that the top floor has what they call a stepped top floor, and that sort of gives you the false impression that they're coming down in height, but they are still 7 stories high. And Mr. Evans, I really appreciate that you have an opinion. And you have every right to have an opinion, and you think that it's a right to have a 7-storey building in the middle of Berrylands. That is not the case, I don't think. It's not in keeping with the area. It doesn't have any benefits to the area whatsoever. It does not protect the character of Berrylands, and it doesn't respect, which is in the document, the surrounding environment. So that was one of the main concerns. Obviously the density issue, I'm not going to pretend to be expert on this, and I understand with any developer that it is a priority to get as many people in an area as possible, but there is the issue of a density and a guide. I know it's only a guide, but apparently in this part of Berrylands it should be 46 to 70 units per hectare. I'm not going to pretend to understand what that means, but I know that their proposals is much greater than that. And actually in the RBK planning consultant on behalf of Burglar Homes, it actually says in there in 7.72, notwithstanding the proposal has a density of 195 units per hectare. So obviously we have a concern about that. And Councillor Sweeney, you did mention about the it was Councillor Shaper. I think you mentioned about the illustrations. Absolutely. I mean, I've got one in front of me here, and it actually, as I came to the meeting, it was in the presentation where it shows that the proposed development is almost the same height as the shops that's in front of it, which is very misleading, because it's obvious that 7 stories that can't be the case. So I think that's really the points, because others have been made and I'm not going to repeat them, but certainly for the local residents we are very concerned about 7 stories in Berrylands. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Would the applicant like to comment on the size of the development? The height?
Hi, yes. I think, you know, I've probably made sort of the point quite clear. I think in terms of the 3-dimensional CGI images that have been produced and form part of the application, there's obviously a perspective that the blocks sit very deep into the site, so that they're further away. So the, you know, that is a true visualization of what you will see. There's an absolute urgent and pressing need for additional housing, and this is an efficient way of helping to meet that need. There is clear national guidance and local planning policy which promotes exactly this type of site for residential development at higher densities than has prevailed previously. That's not to say we ignore the existing character, but we, through the design and access statement that's been produced in the detailed architectural response, we feel that the character has been accounted for, and the proposals do reflect that, albeit in a contemporary manner. It's I think you could have a fascinating debate about this. This site is a microcosm of a much wider debate, really, about where to build new homes for people.
Thank you very much. And I've got the final person speaking this evening is Christine Boudreau.
Hi, good evening. I'm a resident of Kingston, but more importantly, I'm speaking this evening because I manage the Hogsmill Nature Reserve, which is just the other side of the embankment of the proposed development. However, I find it really unfathomable that in your planning, your environmental impact assessment doesn't even mention the nature reserve, which is a designated SINC site, which means it's a site of important nature conservation, and it's less than 500 meters from your development. So I don't comprehend why this wasn't included in your planning EIA. Not to mention, we have great crested newts, so you will require a European protected species license. You have no mention of that. We have 4 species of bats that utilize the nature reserve, particularly the Dalbentons, which numbers are declining rapidly across the whole of the UK, particularly in this area. We are a huge open water area, and the Dalbentons fly across the water, dabble their feet in the water, and collect the insects to feed on the water. The 7 stories that your development will throw so much light reflection on that water that it will make it impossible for those bats to feed. And I think it's very laughable that you say you're going to put bat boxes on your buildings, but that will do nothing with the lighting that you're going to be projecting. So that's just a waste of your time and your money to put that in. And my second question is, sorry, I had another question from a resident that I'm trying to see what it is. Just the great crested newts. It doesn't seem that there's been much research done also in the environmental impact assessment, that there doesn't seem to be much research done or any kind of literature written down that you've looked to see what species are in the area. And we have over 10 red listed birds that nest and utilize the nature reserve as well. We have 165 species recorded on the nature reserve. And as I said, great crested newts and bats, which are both protected under the Countryside Act of 1981. So I guess my question is, now that you know the nature reserve's there, or did you know the nature reserve was there and ignore it, will you do another environmental impact assessment for this planning application?
Okay. Alan, do you want to mention that? I think there was also an outstanding question from Councillor Sumner about the whether there would be additional surveys done before DCC, the Development Control Committee.
Yeah, thank you for all the residents for that really useful input. Hopefully, I've sort of done my best in terms of answering. And then the last sort of section or staple of the debate regarding ecology is extremely important. We understand that the footprint of building can have an impact, and indeed we're required by various legislation, not just planning legislation, to ensure that necessary assessments are made, that are undertaken, and they are presented either as part of the planning application or indeed at different stages of any pre-construction process, which of course we're not yet at that stage. In answer to the questions, yeah, monitoring and reporting is in fact ongoing. The planning application was prepared towards the end of last year with a year prior to that worth of consultation. One cannot undertake any form of reliable bat survey in the winter months, which is why the planning application wasn't initially submitted with anything detailed in terms of bat surveys. There was the preliminary ecological assessment, P, which is a lot easier to say, which identified any protected species across the site, and that was a result of months of monitoring. And don't forget, the applicant owns the site and obviously has full unbridled access to the land that they own. So we haven't been prohibited in any way from undertaking full surveys. We have undertaken the bat surveys, both emergence and pre-emergence surveys, over a number of evenings in early June when the weather was to our benefit. That information has been collated and provided back to the planning authority. It does not demonstrate that there is a specific bat roosting or indeed specific flight across the site. That's been undertaken by qualified ecologists, and as I understand it, and perhaps Alex can confirm, the additional information will also be published by the council. The light spill, again, it peers into immateriality compared to the light spill from the railway station, which is a permanent and continuous light source, rather than that from domestic dwellings.
Sorry, thank you, Alan. I've now, Martin, I've got that you've got two further questions.
Yes, yeah, thanks, Chair. Probably all of these particular issues have been raised by other speakers, but the first communication was from Mr. Neil Bullock, and in summary, his concerns were about the amount of extra people the developments will house, the impact on schools and doctors' services, the impact on the current parking situation, and the need to upgrade the station, especially stairs, and also provide extra trains at peak times. The second extra communication was from a Bridget Walker, and the main concerns in that submission were in relation to height, density and mass, not respecting the local character and context, and the acceptability of a 7-storey building next to 2- and 3-storey housing. Also, where were the houses and gardens that were promised within the strategy? The suitability of design in a suburban rather than a city area. Insufficient affordable housing. Why were policies DM10 and DM11 not being respected? Why should an application site within flood zone 2 be accepted if there are chances that the development will increase the risk of flooding elsewhere? And the acceptability of building by a busy railway track which would exceed noise standards. And finally, there was also a mention again of insufficient car parking standards.
Okay, a lot of those comments were ones that have already been raised. I don't, Alex, is there any of those ones that you would want to make any comment on?
Not on the comments that Martin Newton has just read out, but I would just like to clarify for those listening that it's not yet confirmed whether the proposed development is an environmental impact assessment development. There is a set procedure and set of regulations that have to be undertaken to specifically identify the proposals as a potential EIA development, and they should not be confused with the requirements of the ecological survey. Okay, all right, thank you. So I think we've gone to each of the people who have come along to speak this evening. I want to again thank you for doing that. I'm trying to note that down as I went along, but also so has Martin, and we will make all of these comments will go forward to the DCC. And this is, and those of you who have registered Development Control Committee, I shouldn't really do sort of abbreviating. So, and all of the, if you've registered this evening, then and you will be kept in contact with it as it progresses, as it goes forward. And if you wish to speak at the Development Control Committee in the future, then you can do that. You'd apply it in the same way as you've done this evening. So thank you very much. And if you can now leave the meeting and you can continue to watch on the YouTube. Thank you. Thank you very much. So now we turn to the members of the committee. We kind of strayed into the comments into questions at the beginning, and so now I think is the opportunity for us as members of the committee to ask any additional questions of the developer and developer's representative, or to make any comments. So if I can ask, I did take a note of some earlier that hadn't asked the questions before. I've got Councillor Gander, Councillor Abraham, Councillor Green, and Councillor Yoganathan. Are you in that order? Can I ask you to?
Madam Chair, can I just have a point of order here? Has Alan Evans left the meeting?
Oh, I didn't expect him to leave.
I'm just double checking, Chair, but I think he may have done.
I just said yes, I was expecting the residents to leave.
Okay, I can try and give him a call to get him back in.
Does it affect the process though, because these comments are going forward? But I mean, I do take your point about him being here to answer any questions. Alex, is there anything that you want to sweep up just now while we're waiting?
I'll just double check my notes, Chair.
He has come back. That looks like he's come back now. Yeah, sorry, Alan. I was just meaning thank you for coming back again. It was this is our opportunity now to ask you questions as a committee. That was for the previous section was for the residents to ask questions of you. So if we start again now, I've got Councillor Gander. Do you want to start?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask some questions around the energy saving, I think, more than anything. Energy generation, I note the solar panels, but obviously the first priority should be energy saving. And the one I would really like to focus on is the heat, the overheating. I mean, the report is even called that. I know you've got solar glass. I think it would come in as a comment for later as well, but I think blinds as a condition, I'll come back to that later. I think that should be, they should be installed as a condition. And then I just wondered if you looked at external shading. I know there's the balconies, but they're not always in the right place to give the optimum shading from the sun at its peak. Because if we really are going to be, I mean, you mentioned heading towards carbon neutral, if we are going to get to the kind of passive house standard, we really should be looking at measures like that. There's a lot of talk about doors and windows being able to be opened, but we can go further than that. And then just quickly on the energy saving as well, again, I just wanted to know a little bit more about the fabric of the building. I know the thermal bridging, but about the fabric of the building, please.
Okay, so thank you. Alan, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I can answer certainly in part. I think in terms of the overheating, the proposals are orientated with balconies facing east and west, so there's not a direct southerly balcony aspect, so you don't have the direct glare of the sun into the habitable accommodation, so that assists significantly in terms of mitigating the impact on overheating. I take the point in terms of condition for the details to be blind and things to be included, which again will help with that strategy. I will just need to double check what the actual energy bridging performance is. There is reference to it in the energy assessment that we have submitted. If you give me a couple of seconds, I should be able to answer that. I mean, do you want to quickly look the debate?
I'm really asking the questions because I want these comments fed into to Development Control Committee. So to be honest, I don't really need to know. But I would really come back to you on the east-west facing. My house faces east-west, and we have a real problem with overheating, which we're addressing through solar glass, etc., and other measures over time. So you really, there is still a need to take care of that. So again, I will be making that, hoping that comment goes through to the committee.
I appreciate that.
I'll leave it at that for now, and obviously back to the chair.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, I think it's if you could. We will be listing all of these things for development control, but I suppose if there is, you could update us then. If you can do that, then we can always circulate it to the councillors if you want to do that. So I'll leave that for you to decide. So if we can't go on to the it's Councillor Abraham wanted to question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Firstly, Madam Chair, I am very disappointed, like my fellow councillors, Councillor Sharper and Councillor Sweeney, that there's no illustration at all. The applicant had enough time to come before this committee with proper digital, some kind of view to show the residents and all of us, and that they have failed in that. And I'm just really concerned about it, because this goes then straight to DCC, not giving an opportunity for us to, at a consultation level, to discuss it. Like my fellow councillors, I'm concerned of the height. I'm also, a question I have for Alan is that what is the position in relation to accessibility flats for wheelchair accessibility? And also, how many parking spaces are there for wheelchair users? I'd like to know that, please. And also, the other question I have is in relation to the station. We do know that Verulam Station does not have accessibility at all. What efforts have you made to speak to South West Rail to find out what can be done? It's a big development there. There will be so many people in there. If you're providing accessibility units, etc., then what efforts have you made with South West Rail to have some sort of an accessibility for them to commute? Because of parking and all those other things that come along. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So all of the flats are built to what's called the Building Regulation Part M, subsection 2, which means in plain English they are adaptable for the lifetime of the user or the person living in there. Then of that, then 10% of the total units are actually built to the next level, which is a fitted wheelchair accessibility standard. So 10% of the units, running up to 6, will be wheelchair accessible, and each one of those has a wheelchair accessible parking space.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And the next person I had on my original list was Councillor Green. I think you've put in...
Madam Chair, he did not. Ellen hasn't answered about the issue relating to South West Rail.
I don't know if you can or not, but if you want to make, have you got a comment that you can make on that?
Yes, certainly. I know the developer has spoken both to Network Rail, who manage the asset, and South West Trains, who run the service. Network Rail have an ongoing maintenance and widening accessibility program. That is beyond even my control, sadly. So there is a funding cycle. I'm not sure how decisions are made in that respect. That's something that either Network Rail and South West Rail would need to review specifically. The scheme will contribute under the Community Infrastructure Levy significantly, and in line with Kingston Council's guidance published by the Planning Authority, so that the identified infrastructure requirements are contributed to proportionately as part of the development.
Okay, thank you. So Councillor Green, do you want to?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not really necessarily expecting the developer to come back on this. It's more of a comment than a question. I think you've missed a real trick here. I think the site is eminently suitable for development. It is a brownfield site. We need new homes. And I think there is a lot that could have been done. Where I think it's gone wrong predominantly is the height, but mostly the design. Berrylands is a 1920s, 30s area. It takes its look quite a lot from Art Deco. The block that it's a shame Naomi has gone from the meeting now, but I'm sure she will watch this and have it relayed to her. The design could be anywhere. I mean, frankly, I think it's ugly, the design, but more importantly, it's not Berrylands. If you had taken a design and worked really hard at it, I think you could have come up with a development that was suitable for there, that you could have taken the majority of residents along with you. I think if you'd come with a blank sheet of paper to residents who live in this area, and I don't live that far away, I live far enough away that I don't have a prejudicial interest, but not that far away from the site. And I think that if you brought it to the residents of Berrylands, who are eminently sensible and know we need new homes, you actually could have walked away with an easy planning permission for something suitable. And so I just really wanted to get that off my chest, I suppose, and say, if you were willing to start again, I think the people of Berrylands would work with you, and you'd come up with something that most people, you can never please everybody, would get behind. You'd then be going to DCC with something with half a dozen complaints instead of several hundred, objections instead of several hundred objections, and you'd almost definitely get it. So I just think it's a lost opportunity here. I hope DCC actually doesn't pass this, and then you come back and we can all work together on something that would work. So it's just a comment. I'm not necessarily expecting Alan to come back on it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Green. I've now got Councillor Jürgen,
yes. Sorry, Chair. I think it's nothing personal about Alan. I've been living in this Berryland area in excess of 45 years, Alan. I know this area in and out. I think, like my ward councillor Liz said it, we are looking for homes, but not like this. It got to blend with the area. The height is not acceptable, and it is very near to the Berryland station. That is only 2 trains an hour. We've been trying for a long time with the Southwest Trains and the management. They haven't got the money. Nobody has got the money. That is a problem. And in terms of the safety is a problem. And the affordable homes, I think it's less than 20%, something like 18%. Not acceptable at all, sir. The cost benefit analysis is very important to us. Please, we need it, because we are looking for brownfield site to maximize the effort. Like Liz said, we can work with it. And the ward councillors, the Meadowlands ward councillors, 3 of them, they have raised the same concern. I am on St. Mark's side. The other point is, on the other side of the things, is all nature reserves, and we know the Lower Marsh Lane is going there, and then some of them are been trying for student accommodation, and we have objected it on number of area. I'm not going to say this one. I don't want to take your time. It's already 22:35. Having said that, it could blend and work along with it. These are my positive way of passing comments. We need properties not in the same basis. And if you are doing something on environmental basis, yes. But the 7 stories is nowhere near to it. Please do something and look at it, and also get everything for the DCC. I think at least, it's brought to, thank you, Chair, to brought to our neighborhood for people to pass a comments. I think the more comments has been, most of the comments been raised effectively well, and the ward councillors is very important. I don't need to speak like this, but I can speak longer and also go for naughty things. But I am not here. I need development. I can't do it. I need people like you. But as long as we are blending and talking effectively well in a balanced basis. That's all, Chair. Thank you for listening to me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And I've got, I think I've gone through everybody that's wanting to make comments and questions, but Councillor Sumner, you've got questions of Alex, have you? Is that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll obviously keep it really brief. I was just, you may have noticed I have gone through this in great detail. I was wondering why there was no responses from statutory consultees. There's no response from Network Rail, or there wasn't when I looked yesterday in the report. And I couldn't find any response actually from Thames Water either, just from the Environment Agency. And I'd be really interested to see their responses, but there wasn't one on the website when I looked yesterday. I think, my thoughts on it is too bulky. It's just too bulky and too tall for the character, but that's been raised already, so I won't repeat that. But my real concern about this is, and again, we're in a unique period of time. My concern is, even if DC are minded to pass this, I hope they don't, but if they are, we're in a situation, because of the changes that the government's making to the General Permitted Development Order 2020 amendments, COVID special, once it's built, the developers could just go in and slap 2 stories on top. And so I think that's why we have to be sure that we get this right, because they could just come in, build it, and then put another 2 stories on, and we won't be able to do anything. And so we have to be sure we get it right. So if it was going to be, if people were minded to pass it, and I'm not, I would like to make sure there's an Article 4 direction on it, so they can't do that. Take away permitted development rights. So I'd like that adding on, because that's the main concern, apart from the mass, is about flooding, and it's a flood risk 3. And in the report, they think they satisfied the criteria for flood risk 2. But for flood risk 3, you need exceptional tests, and I don't think we've met that. And I would also like to highlight the remarks that were made for the Minister for Housing, Communities and Local Government, who said that anything from now on that was in a flood risk was going to have to go. It was going to have to go for ministerial sign-off. So would that be affected on this one as well? Because they already, in their very expensive report, make reference to flood risk 2 and flood risk 3, and and I don't think it's met those circumstances.
Thank you, Councillor Sumner. I'm just conscious of the time, and I know we've mentioned. I've noted down the floods issues already. So, Alex, have you got something you'd like to comment on that?
Just to clarify, Councillor Falchcroft-Sumner's request, if you like, that PD rights are removed for any future permission. It wouldn't be an Article 4 direction. That wouldn't be the mechanism that we would use, even if it were appropriate. So I just wanted to make that clarification.
That's what it says from government legislation.
Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't muted then, my apologies. No, I read through the Amendments Act. I read through them yesterday, and it actually said the only way of preventing it was an Article 4 direction. And that was in the government bill. So I don't know. Maybe the government bill's wrong.
All right, thank you for that comment. I just was going to sum up quite quickly, but I just noticed that Councillor Sweeney's put something. If you can just be quick, a quick comment, that would be great, and then I can finish off, summarise, and thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think yeah, it's a comment for the ears of the planning team and the developers. I think residents and councillors have participated in the consultation process. There was a great opportunity here. I think what you have been told you haven't listened to, and we're now in a situation where this development doesn't meet our planning policies, CS8, DM10, DM11, DM13. All of these are not being met, and you've now been told that by, I think, residents, and now you're being told that tonight. So in its current state, I don't think it's acceptable for the area. So that's my comment after listening to everything tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Sweeney. All right, so that had a lot of comments this evening, a lot of questions. I've tried to go through some of them, but the sort of key things that are coming through from me is to do with the height and the character of the building. A little bit more perspective. I think it's probably. I know you said you were going to do the 3D images, but I actually think it's for me, and it's about what you would see if you were standing at the roundabout where the Berrylands pub is, and looking down. What would you actually be seeing from there? Because I think that's the residents' concern is actually what the impact is going to be on the horizon. There's some other questions regarding some reports, ecological reports to be done before DCC. But what I will say is that we will go away. Martin will go away and list all of these things if the committee is happy for us to do that, to go away and take these comments and submit them to the Development Control Committee. Is that, can I indicate if in the chat box if members are happy with that? Looks like there's lots of shaking of heads and in a sort of affirmative and not in a no, and also some in the chat box. So I'll not then take it to a vote. I'll just say that if we can just take it that it's a recommendation that we agree that it's been discussed. The applicant's representatives have heard what has been said this evening, and thank him and for Naomi for coming this evening, and thank you for that. I think from that point, we will. There is no. I've been told there's no other urgent items or exempt business, and I can close the meeting at 22:42. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Well done.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Alison.